is charged.
Bastard! Bastard!
And I'm going to make it clear to you that I will not tolerate such conduct in this prison.
Bastard! 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 Bastard!
Get him out of here.
Bastard! 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 Bastard!
Move yourself. Come on, move. Don't let them see you on the ground. Come on.
You filthy, dirty.
My blood turns you on, but my shit makes you cringe. You're going to have to go home reeking of my shit.
Animal!
Jimmy Boyle from a cartel seems to be doing quite well in the special unit of the body, making lots of art in a prison cell. But there was a time when he made a naughty smell and covered his cell with jobbies to keep away the bobbies. But since he married his psychiatrist, he probably uses body mist. Well, wasn't that a funny twist of fate? Jimmy Boyle from the Godbells seems to be doing quite well. Now he is an intellectual, writing plays and books about himself. But at one time he was called an animal. The prisoners used to fear him, and the screws wouldn't go near him. But since they took the shackles off his wrist, he's on the Glasgow Art Club's waiting list. Isn't that a funny twist of fate? Jimmy Boyle from the Godbells seems to be doing quite well. Jimmy Boyle from the Godbells seems to be doing quite well. Jimmy Boyle from the Godbells seems to be doing quite well. Still a wee bit controversial with sneak previews of films and that as well. To see him now, it's awfully hard to tell that he used to be a hard man, a gangland battle scarred man. But since he put away the iron fist, he's a bit of a philanthropist. Well, isn't that a funny
Le 18 septembre 1967, dans un bar de Londres, la police anglaise arrête un jeune chef de gang des bas-fonds de Glasgow. La presse le surnomme Babyface, gueule d'ange. À 23 ans, Jimmy Boyle est alors considéré comme le criminel le plus dangereux et le plus recherché de toute l'Écosse. 3 mois plus tard, le tribunal de Glasgow le condamne à la réclusion à perpétuité. C'est en prison où il aura passé en tout 26 ans de sa vie avant de retrouver la liberté que Jimmy Boyle deviendra un écrivain et un sculpteur de renom.
I don't think it's good enough for me to say that I was born in the Gorbals in May 1944 and leave it at that. Perhaps it's all I can say. But who am I? I don't really know who I am. The one thing I'm certain of is the womb I came from. My mother Bessie was in many ways too good for this world. And the more I got to know the world, the more I believed this. At my trial, all the civil dignitaries had come, including the Lord Provost of Glasgow, all the top policemen, because they seen me as a very important sort of person in the criminal world. And when they came, and the courtroom was full of these people, and even the little court ushers who hand over the exhibits to the various people who were sitting there, when the jury says guilty, everyone started to clap and cheer, and the little men, the court ushers with the little starch uniforms, turned round to the policeman and went, I was sentenced to life imprisonment. And inside, that feeling will never leave me. To be sentenced to life imprisonment is one of the worst things that could ever happen to anyone. It is an earth-shattering experience. You know, because for me at 20, you know, your life is totally finished. You just think, I never thought I would ever get out again.
Environ 12 détenus de cette centrale fréquentent un atelier de peinture qui fonctionne sans intervenant extérieur. Jean-Claude, un détenu passionné par cet art, assure l'animation des activités et l'initiation des débutants.
Ok. De toute façon, on leur au prochain passage.
Ouais.
On repassera un coup de blanc ici.
Ouais. Ok.
Ouais, on fait les châssis nous-mêmes, et après je tourne les toiles de lin, et après on les enduit de colle de peau, après de gesso, et puis on a une toile pour 5 francs, au lieu de 50 francs. Ouais, voilà. Mais bon, après quand on les expose, certaines personnes, ils achètent une toile, alors qu'est-ce qu'ils font? Ils retournent, ah c'est pas une vraie toile, vous savez, ils sont difficiles les gens, hein, même quand ils ne payent pas cher. Voilà, donc. Alors là c'est vrai, un petit atelier où on fait tout ce bricolage.
And there's these police dancing around, and of course the thing you've got to do is to keep a straight face and not show anger and just look at them and try and let them think that you're cool. And you know, the paper said I showed no emotion, and so they took my tie off in case I was going to commit suicide, and then they locked me in the cell, and I wanted to cry, but I couldn't cry. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't scream. The ironic thing is, by that time, I had completed building my own prison. And it was so symbolic that then I was sentenced to serve the rest of my life inside prison. Because the Gorbals in Glasgow, is where I was born, was a prison to me. And everybody who was in that prison either come from the Gorbals or areas like that. The one thing we all had in common was poverty. And so I suppose part of me was trying, in a sense, to come to terms with my living death. After being sentenced to life imprisonment, I was considered a top security, high security prisoner, and probably, and I was described as the most dangerous man in Scotland. So I was kept in solitary confinement immediately afterwards. And then I was sent to Inverness prison, which is in the far north of Scotland. I had to travel in a convoy of police cars. And the ironic thing is that in order to get there, I seen for the first time what a beautiful country Scotland was. And here was a world that I had never, ever seen in my free life. And as we approached Inverness, you go through the town itself, and you turn a corner, and there, right in the centre of Inverness, is this prison. And there was this high Victorian stone wall, and this huge green door. And we sat there waiting for the doors to open, for us to go in. The prison in Inverness holds about 70 prisoners serving local sentences, but there's a block reserved for troublemakers, so that Inverness is the Siberia for prisoners in the Scottish penal system.
C'est la seule chose que je peux faire ici. C'est la seule chose que je peux faire ici, dans le sens où, hormis l'entretien physique auquel je consacre la matinée, il n'y a rien d'autre. Rien d'autre pour parler, pour être on y pourrait être dans le temps, pour dire de rêver. Parce qu'ici, les occasions de rêver, hormis quand ça vous prend le soir, quand vous dormez au moment où vous attendez le moins, il n'y a pas d'occasion de rêver. Vous voyez ce que je veux dire? Ça n'existe pas. Le rêve ici n'existe pas.
L'atelier de peinture sur soie n'est fréquenté que par quelques détenus. Aucun intervenant extérieur n'en assure l'animation.
Je me démerde tout seul, moi, de la peinture. Ce que je fais devant vous aujourd'hui, je le fais moi. Il n'y a personne qui est venu me montrer la technique, par la technique, etc., etc. Et là, cette technique, il a fallu que je l'apprenne tout seul. Ici, je trouve le temps de réfléchir. Pendant que je fais ça, je réfléchis. Mais ça ne m'intéresse pas, à la limite. Ouais, je veux dire. Je vais mettre tout mon cœur pour le faire. Avec tout mon savoir-faire. Mais je suis là pour réfléchir. Avant tout. Parce que je sais que ça ne sert à rien. Dans le sens de servir. Ouais, ça ne sert à rien. Ici, tout ce qui est autour de nous ne sert à rien. C'est du décor.
So after 10 months, I had worked out within myself a direction in which I was taking. And the direction was that I was making my own laws in this world. I was not adhering to the laws of the prison regime. I also became a sort of leader within the prison. So after 10 months, they allowed me back into the normal regime. I was out one day, and because of the brutality that had been taking place, I organised a riot and attacked prison officers, and was then taken back into solitary confinement and brutalised. And that was the sort of regime I worked in. Eventually, what happened was that the prison officers refused to handle me, and so they created a special unit in Inverness prison, and that was the cages. When you were in the cage, you had one side metal bars, and then there were 3 walls behind you, and you could take 3 small steps length and 2 small steps in width. That was your total movement. And I was put in there and kept there naked, and they had a fluorescent light, and everything was painted pale blue, and the light was on 24 hours a day. So that was my total existence for 6.5 years. I relished in keeping myself fit and keeping myself mentally alive. But in the other 4 cells, the other 4 cages, I could hear men so full of drugs falling and hitting their heads and bodies off the iron cages. I could hear people tear sheets and try to hang themselves. 1 or 2 succeeding, others not. But every night they would try. And I could hear prison officers outside looking through the spy hole and laughing. And it was a horrendous regime. And the brutality in it was unbelievable.
Louis a découvert la peinture en prison. Il peint environ 12 heures par jour, seul dans sa cellule, sans lien avec l'atelier d'art plastique. Pour réaliser une toile, 3 mois de travail lui sont nécessaires. Chaque toile achevée est pliée et rangée sous son matelas. 40 tableaux sont ainsi stockés dans sa cellule.
Me sentía en una jaula completamente, porque es una jaula. Es un calabozo disimulado. Un calabozo disimulado donde lo tienen a uno con un televisor si tiene con qué pagar. Si no tiene con qué pagar un televisor, no tiene nada. Si no tiene una radio, no compra una radio, no tiene nada. Entonces se encuentra uno únicamente con el pensamiento lejos. A su familia, a su mundo, a su trabajo. Entonces, si yo he sido responsable conmigo y con mi familia, y me encuentro en un momento en que yo no valgo nada, y que me diga mi mujer, mis hijos, los hijos tienen hambre, y yo tengo hambre. Pues es el momento duro, muy duro. Cogí, preparé el lazo y decidí ahorcarme. Y me subí al mezanín. Cuando salía a la promenada, me enredé, ¿sí? Y me lancé, ¿sí? Más el lazo que hice y unas peñas de estas no aguantaron, y cuando bajaba se reventó, ¿sí? Caía al suelo y me reventé la cabeza. Y me cogieron los villanos y me llevaron a la enfermería. Me dieron unos calmantes y me dijeron los villanos, le vamos a poner una denuncia a usted por intento de homicidio. ¿Cómo por intento de homicidio? Uno que hablaba español. Entonces sí, porque usted es un intento de homicidio contra usted mismo.
I'd become completely animalised. I'd spent all that time naked, and your meals would be put in under the cage in a plastic bowl with a plastic spoon, and I would sit on the floor like an animal and eat this food. If a prison officer came into the hallway outside the cages, I could hear his clothes wrinkle. I could smell tobacco in his pocket. If he had shoes on, I could smell boot polish. Because all my senses were in and around me. There was nothing else. And because I was totally naked, I didn't feel cold the way that I felt. I had lost the ability to put my hands in my pockets, to do all those ordinary everyday things that people are used to doing. And if you've been years without a chair, then a chair is lost to your thinking. And that has a very deep impact in the way that you live your life throughout those years of being alone, of being isolated.
On sait très bien qu'on est en train de se rendre malade à l'intérieur, hein. L'angoisse, c'est-à-dire que vous êtes en prison et le fait d'être dans des murs, eh bien ça, vous êtes plus du tout pareil, hein. C'est vrai que quand on va sortir, je suis persuadé qu'on n'est plus du tout pareil, hein. D'une, on doit longer des murs, je suis persuadé qu'on longe des murs, on ne vit plus du tout pareil. On n'a pas le même sourire en prison, hein. Même ça arrive qu'on ait des sourires en prison, des rires en prison. C'est pas le même rire qu'on a à l'extérieur. Et je pense que quand on sortira, bah, ça sera pas du tout le même rire. Et les plaisanteries, on les comprendra pas du tout pareil non plus, hein. Donc vous voyez, cette angoisse, bah, ça aussi on y pense, on le sait, hein. Puis on sait très bien que peut-être qu'on risque de finir SDF, arrivé à plus de 50 ans, quand on sortira. Donc il y a cette angoisse de dire, j'étais quelqu'un de bien avant de rentrer, et quand je vais sortir, il y a une chance sur deux d'être SDF.
Because I didn't take any artificial stimulants like drugs or let anything else control me, I began to understand who I was as a person. I began to find who the real Jimmy Boyle was. I began to recognise that in me were immense strengths. I also realised, albeit very late, through reading books, that I had intelligence, that I was not the psychopath that everyone portrayed me as. I knew the truth about me, and I then began to accept the truth of me. So I found this inner strength which has taken me through the rest of my life.
Environ 10 détenus participent à l'atelier de sculpture ouvert ici depuis 1992. Une intervenante extérieure en assure le fonctionnement.
Enfin, moi, dans prison, je suis révoltée. Je veux dire que je me sens pas encore perdue. C'est la révolte profonde. Et ça me permet de garder un peu la paix avec moi-même et avec tout ce système. En fait. Mais c'est vrai qu'on est dans un système d'assistanat complet. Ici, on mange à heure fixe, on va là, vous allez à tel endroit et pas à un autre. Vous avez telle heure pour aller prendre des médicaments quand ça va pas. Bon. Il faut surtout pas être adulte et conscient. Il me paraît que les prisons d'hommes sont plus dures, mais en fait la détresse chez les femmes est bien plus importante, je crois, en plus. Il y a les enfants à l'extérieur, donc il y a je crois que tout est fait pour culpabiliser les femmes, en fait, d'une certaine manière. Bon. Les femmes qui ont leurs enfants à l'extérieur, on a des spectacles, on a des sapins de Noël, mais tout ça, ça ramène en fait aux enfants, à la faute, à la culpabilité, en fait.
I would think of the things I have never done and imagine doing them. I would think of places I have never been to and imagine being there. But you don't think all of that without bringing the emotional feelings with it. And then mostly it was pain. And I suppose for me it was one way of keeping my feelings alive, not killing my feelings. But it was very, very important for me to be in touch with those feelings and not to be a dead soul inside that dead place.
Je passe beaucoup de temps à rêver dans la cellule, sans avoir forcément besoin de parler, juste en regardant dehors et l'imagination, elle travaille beaucoup. Maintenant, c'est dur il y a toujours quelque chose qui vous rappelle à l'ordre, en fait, qui vous fait redescendre, si on veut, qui vous coupe le rêve, quoi. Et j'ai découvert ici, avec la sculpture, que je pouvais faire quand même justement des choses avec mes mains, ce dont je ne me serais jamais sentie capable ou cru capable. Et ça m'a permis de pouvoir rêver en même temps. Et j'ai eu l'impression que ce qui se passait en fait dans la tête, le rêve, se ressentait au niveau des sculptures. Comme si tout ce que j'avais toujours eu envie de faire pouvait passer dans mes mains comme un fluide, sans que je m'en rende compte vraiment.
In 1973, I was lying in my cage in Inverness prison, and there was no other persons in any other cages. I was lying there on my own, recovering from a fractured skull, broken jaw and multiple head lacerations. I was charged with the attempted murder of 6 prison officers. It was in that situation that the cell door opened, and a prison officer came in with a man in civilian clothing, and they brought 2 chairs in for these people to sit outside. They began to speak to me not like prison people. The prison officer said they were there to interview me for a new prison regime called the Special Unit in Barlinnie Prison. And then one day they took me outside and there was 4 police cars there, and I was put in the middle one and nobody ever spoke to me. And they drove me from Inverness to Barlinnie Prison. And then taken down to a little small green door. And the door was opened. I was surrounded by armed policemen. And there was this tall prison officer who had come to interview me, and a small fat prison officers, but they were wearing white doctor's coats over the prison uniform, which immediately made me feel this is a stepping stone to the state mental hospital. The tall prison officer was Ken Murray, and he told them to take the handcuffs off me. And the small prison officer, and I'll never forget this, says, "Do you want tea or coffee? And do you want milk and sugar, Jimmy?" And it was the most mind-blowing thing that anyone could ever have said to me. And Ken Murray took me by the arm and took me through this courtyard and into this small building. And he talked to me about his hopes, dreams, and aspirations for the special unit.
Jimmy Boyle was probably the most notorious prisoner in Scotland at one time. It was decided that he should be considered to come to the special unit, but the prison department said no. I remember at the time when we went and said, "Look, we've got to take Jimmy Boyle." The prison department said, "If you take him, he'll destroy your unit." But nevertheless, we persuaded them that if we didn't take him, then it meant that our status as a organisation would be failing. So we took him.
The special unit had a name of housing the hardest of prisoners. All of us but one were life sentence prisoners. The name special unit was always very controversial because it meant it was different. It was set apart. And the reason they called it the special unit is because it was dealing with very serious and special circumstances, in the sense that we had pushed the system as far as it could go. In other words, we'd broken down the brick wall.
We had an overall philosophy that we were going to try to create an atmosphere where prison staff and prisoners could live together in a tolerable way. That was a very simple philosophy. And that meant that we had to have better relationships with each other. And that meant we had to talk to each other. That might sound simple, but it's not so simple in prison. And these are the kind of things, the only objectives we had in the early days to try to create that atmosphere. I am satisfied that after, I would say, about a 9 months period, that gestation period, we succeeded in doing that. But I have to tell you that the first 6 to 9 months were extremely difficult, because both sides were very suspicious of one another.
The didn't have the same regime as the prison regime. They didn't have work. So you didn't have to go to a workshop to work. What they said is that we have this regime and none of us know how it's going to work. But the one thing we do have is a room where prison officers and prisoners should sit in and discuss once a week what way they want the place to go. And that was very difficult because we'd never had responsibility for anything like that in our lives before. And I'll never forget the first meeting that the prison officer says, well, you know, if you have any problems, you've got to tell us your problems. So, you know, here I was with a life sentence with a 15 years recommended minimum, 12 and a half years on top for prison riots, and never getting out again. And these guys were asking me to tell them the problems. When you first entered the special unit, there was a small enclosed exercise yard, and then there was the building which had a meeting room, there was a small kitchen, and there was 16 prison cells. The cells in the special unit were no different from cells in the ordinary prisons. The difference being that we can change the interior of the cells, make them much more homely. We can have our visitors come into our cells and have privacy. The other thing was all the doors were kept unlocked and you could walk into any room. And that freedom of being able to walk from the enclosed interior of the building into the outside exercise yard without supervision was incredible. And immediately, the thing that was given to each of us was trust. Something that we'd never had in many, many years.
By using that kind of practice, it's just completely different from anything in the prison system, where you could say to the prisoner that your judgment is valued here and you've got to make the decision, because remember that in prison, prisoners are not allowed to make decisions.
One of the first outside people to come into the special unit happened, I think it was about 6 weeks after the special unit opened. And as part of our demand to get outside people in, they brought in a woman called Joyce Lane. And they told us she was an art therapist. It was in an evening, and the prison officers were obviously quite tense. Some of them were, because they were suggesting that maybe we would rape her or do something.
So I was picking up a bit of hesitancy and suspicion and not being very sure of me.
The truth was, we were up in our cells getting our hairs combed and making sure we were tidy and saying to each other, don't swear, she won't come back.
And then I would chat with them for an hour or so and say, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave you art materials. Now you use them, but for you, do what you like with them. I'm not going to criticize anything. If you want to show me what you've done, I'll be happy to see it. But if you want to keep it, quiet, that's okay. And I would put the bags of material down, and I would go back the next week, and the bags were sitting there. Not only sitting exactly in the spot I put them down, and I did wonder what was going on. I thought, why don't they open them? Why don't they look inside?
You've got to understand that art was so foreign to our existence. We always looked at it as something for the snobs or the toffs. It was nothing to do with us.
And I went in on this day and I took in some more. I had clay with me on this occasion. And I said, they were sitting there as ever. Same place, same huddled at the back. And again, the bags hadn't been touched. And I said to them, you know, I'm fed up of you guys. You're wasting your own time. And you're not going to waste my time. So if you're not going to do anything, there's plenty of art I can do. So I sat on the floor because there were no tables. And I started making just what came out of my head. And I remembered a little, I think it was a little Donatelli head of a small cherub or something. So I remembered something like that. And I started doing this little bas-relief on it. And they watched everything. I mean, I was aware. I always feel they were a bit like foxes, you know, watching every move, yet saying very little apart from occasional question, but not much about the technical thing, just, you know, a bit more about art and so on. And so again, at the end of the day, I said, right, I just left it and got up and went away and said, there's materials, you can try that. And the next time I went back, Jimmy Boyle had started making a small head of it. And I knew the minute I saw that the breakthrough had happened. And also, I knew that if one of them had started, it would spread.
Des activités parce qu'elles sont effectivement nécessaires, qu'il y a un besoin pour nous de pouvoir s'exprimer, mais je ne sais pas s'ils ont vraiment la notion de tout ce que ça nous apporte à nous, par contre. Et peut-être que si effectivement le jour où s'apercevrait que ça nous apporte tout ça, peut-être qu'elle serait supprimée, l'activité. Parce que c'est interdit, le plaisir en prison. Il y aura toujours des regards réprobateurs qui vont sonner vers vous, dès qu'ils sentiront le moindre bien-être. Donc, par contre, ils ont fait une exposition il n'y a pas longtemps, donc il y a quand même aussi des bonnes choses, c'est vrai, qui sont faites, il y a quand même une ouverture. Mais c'est par toujours le travail des intervenants, et chaque fois c'est une lutte sur un long terme, pour pouvoir obtenir que ces choses-là puissent être prolongées, justement. Il n'y a rien qui est vraiment définitivement acquis, quoi.
I took the clay and I started to play with it. And it was almost as though I'd actually known it from somewhere. And then very quickly I did a portrait of one of the prisoners. And it was the most amazing experience. It was like a dam burst open on me, a creative dam. And suddenly everything came gushing out of me. It was the most liberating feeling that I have ever had in my life. It was a gush of total good feeling. And I had the manifestation of that in my hands. And it was the first positive thing I'd done in my life.
Chaque année, en France, une association organise avec le soutien du ministère de la Justice une exposition d'œuvres réalisées par des détenus. Ce jour-là, le comité de sélection désigné par l'association vient examiner les tableaux de Louis.
Donc les gens du comité de sélection, ce sont ces deux dames qui choisissent, elles sont compétentes pour le faire, puisqu'il y en a une qui est conservateur de musée et l'autre qui est conférencière. Donc elles font leur choix.
C'est sûr qu'il a quand même son côté... il est sud-américain, colombien. Ouais. Bon, c'est réaliste, c'est très personnel. C'est bien parce que je trouve que ce qui est sympa, c'est quand il mêle justement son folklorique de son pays. J'ai fallu voir la patte plus exactement là dans les autres. C'est Chassériau, l'autre. Je vois plus. Ah, c'est Ernagre. Ouais. Non. Ah, à droite. Bonjour.
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 Vous voyez par exemple ça, ces drapés là, vous voyez tout ça, avec, est-ce que ça a été quelque chose de très facile à apprendre? Parce que ça, en technique seule, voilà, vous avez préparé quelque chose.
Est-ce que c'est l'esquisse?
Oui.
De ça.
Oui. Et vous faites qu'une esquisse, vous ne commencez pas à faire justement le jeu du modelé dans le crayon, vous le faites directement à la peinture.
Le crayon.
Oui, le crayon, oui.
Le crayon.
Avec le crayon à papier, voilà. Vous faites vos ombres.
Crayon.
Oui, vous faites les ombres.
Aquí, un crayon. Ça, la porte ici.
Oui,
Aquí
je
à la
comprends,
carte
avec
crayon.
le carreau, oui.
Sí, el crayon. Crayon. Sí.
Oui, et la lumière, vous avez une lumière, vous êtes éclairé par la lumière?
La lumière.
Ou alors elle vient?
Non, la lumière dépend de la peinture. De la peinture.
Oui.
La lumière, c'est o ça.
D'accord.
O ça. Depende de la peinture. ¿Sí?
Oui.
Porque el volumen depende de la pintura. ¿Sí? Para la lumière. Bueno, la lumière, hay que saber...
Oui, on peut, elle peut venir de n'importe où, comme là, justement, on n'a pas besoin d'un éclairage.
Pour la sombra de tout ça.
Bien, mais je sais pas.
Non, on va le choisir maintenant.
Evelyne, combien on avait dit qu'on en prenait? Ouais. Ben, on peut peut-être prendre celui-là. Comment il s'appelle celui-ci?
Evelyne, tu vas être prête?
Le nom?
Non, le tengo.
Vous n'avez pas donné de nom?
Il nous faut un nom parce que...
Vamos a poner el nom.
Quelques mois après la visite du comité de sélection, Louis a bénéficié d'une mise en liberté anticipée.
The Barlinnie Special Unit became a very powerful prison model for improving the whole system. It was now being recognised internationally, and we were getting visitors from many people throughout the world. But within Scotland itself, it was getting lots of bad publicity from the tabloid press. They were almost daily having headlines that we were being treated with kid gloves and we were being pampered and spoiled. And that put a lot of pressure on the prison hierarchy.
En 1994, l'administration pénitentiaire écossaise cède aux attaques incessantes de la presse à scandale et décide de mettre fin, après 20 ans d'existence, à l'expérience de l'unité spéciale de Barlinnie, malgré une indéniable réussite en matière de réinsertion des détenus.
The normal recidivist rate for all adult prisoners in Scotland is about 92%. That's 92% of all adults in Scotland who get released come back again within 1 year of their imprisonment. well, they used the same criteria for the special unit, and it was 4%. In other words, it was only 2 guys came back. And I mean, it was that kind of percentage levels that I would say any serious investigator looking at the prison system would ask a serious questions. How did that happen?
That's why.
Prisons, on the whole, are about taking away the individual's identity. The Barlinnie Special Unit was about giving back the identity and trying to build on that, trying to help the prisoner to examine their own identity and to see if they could develop themselves through it. But if you take the person's identity away, you haven't much hope. You've got nothing to build on.
Well, see this bike here? This bike really doesn't go anywhere. But if you've got good imagination, it can take you everywhere. You see the perspective in the mural is if I got on this bike and just face that mural and start pedaling, and you've got a good imagination, you just can see all the way right in there, right up that road, and imagine you're getting up. It's great for guys that really can't go anywhere, you see what I mean? It's a way of getting out of the prison.
Aujourd'hui, le bâtiment qui abritait l'unité spéciale est devenu une prison comme une autre. Après avoir passé 8 années à Barlinnie et s'être rendu célèbre par ses écrits et ses sculptures, Jimmy Boyle bénéficie d'une mise en liberté conditionnelle. Il sort de prison le 1er novembre 1982.
As far as my past goes, I don't think that it should be forgotten about or swept under the carpet as though it didn't exist. It does exist and is very much a part of me. My own personal experiences have taught me that mistakes made are very much a part of living.